Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever it is you are. This is Lunch with Lincoln. Thanks for coming back, everybody. I am joined today by Ryan Wiggins, Communications Director for the Lincoln Project. I, of course, am Reed Galen, one of the co-founders. Want to thank you again for joining us your first Monday in August here. It's hard to believe, Ryan, that the summer for so many of us is almost over. We hope that our kids are going back to school happy and healthy, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Also want to say thank you to everybody that came out to see us in Colorado last week. It was good to be out and about and to see so many diehard supporters of the Lincoln Project. And so we will hopefully be making our way around to different states as we get through here. I am sitting outside in a beautiful area, so there's a little bit of noise. And so when I ask Ryan a question, you'll probably see me go on mute, but don't worry, I haven't gone anywhere. So Ryan, let's talk about a couple of things. One, you are a proud Floridian.
I'm a Floridian. These days, I'm not as proud. I'm a Floridian.
Fair enough. The one thing you can count on Florida being is more Florida than it was before. So let's talk about this. There's a couple of things going on. One is obviously you have an explosion of COVID cases. That is coupled with Governor Ron DeSantis about 10 days ago saying everybody should get vaccinated. But then apparently you're getting enough political pressure to say that not only is he not going to mandate masks anywhere, any school district that does mandate them for kids will not receive funding from the Florida Board of Education, which I assume would prevent them from opening in the first place. So as someone who's living down there and going through that, tell us a little bit about what you're experiencing at the moment across sort of the public health, public education, sort of just trying to get through the day perspective.
It's really frustrating. I mean, Reed, I have two kids. I have an 11, well, soon to be 13-year-old now, and I have a 9-year-old. And they're both starting back to school on Monday. And my 12-year-old, who will be 13 next week, has received one of his two vaccines. He gets the other one, I think, on the 13th. But my 9-year-old can't get one. And we have a major, major outbreak here. Florida is leading the country in COVID cases. And it's terrifying. I mean, as a mom, I am being given the choice between either sending my children back to school and risking them getting very, very sick and potentially not having a bed in a hospital if they needed one, or going to jail for not having my kid in school because my governor has cut the funding to virtual schools. So those are my options. My school cannot mandate masks for my kids, for anyone's kids. My kids will be in masks this year. But what do you do? I mean, it is a helpless situation that Florida families find themselves in right now, because we're seeing this. The other thing, you and I were talking a little bit about this before we went on air. Florida has more than just the Delta variant. We have the Lambda variant. We have a couple other variants that are cruising around South Florida right now. And as you know, I mean, as big as Florida is, this will spread like lightning. And it's a very, very scary place to be with a governor who's not taking it seriously and no one who's able to hold him accountable. There's no repercussion for his action until, the election in 2022.
Well, and that's one thing. So, guys, probably about 6 weeks ago, I think I've mentioned this before on the Lincoln Project podcast, I had a woman named Dr. Charity Dean on, and Dr. Dean talked about the idea that once you've broken containment with a novel pathogen, as she calls it, like the coronavirus, at that point, it's really too late to do much about it. And the mitigation effects you're taking are going to be not that effective and are going to induce a lot of personal hardship, economic hardship, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's, Ryan, what we're seeing, which is 40% of the country, 40% of some states, especially the southern states, are vaccinated. People are now anti-mask as a means of sort of political protest, despite the fact that this thing is going to get them as it gets nastier and more virulent. And so now we have, Republicans, and we see this with DeSantis, we see this with Abbott, where, they haven't been interested in governing, right? But to me, the issue is that they're not interested in governing. They've decided that public education is somehow, going to create a bunch of pointy-headed liberals as opposed to creating, economically viable young Floridians, young Texans, young Americans. But the flip side is it allows them to, as you noted before we went on the air, blame a Joe Biden for it, blame the administration, blame Dr. Fauci, and then also further reduce the belief and faith that people have in institutions. And so their bad behavior is not just one of saying kids aren't going to get educated if they have to wear masks, but also a further, sort of diminution of, the institutions that a lot of us come to rely on, especially with kids.
Absolutely. I mean, Reed, I look at this, and part of the reason that I got vaccinated was for my children and for other children that couldn't do it. And, there are people out there. I have one of my very best friends in the world had colon cancer a couple of years ago, and, her immunity shot to nothing. Like, it's on us. It's on us to make sure that our kids are safe. It's on us to make sure that our friends are safe. It's on us to make sure that those in vulnerable populations who cannot get the vaccine are safe. And it is, I will go as far as say un-American to not do this right now. If you are capable of getting the vaccine and you are willing to watch your economy potentially crash, you're willing to watch the country suffer, you're willing to watch millions of Americans potentially die, plus children, there's something wrong with you. Like, that is not how we operate in this nation. And it's disgusting. It's upsetting that it's become a political talking point. I mean, I have a rule in my family. Reed, I am in the Florida Panhandle, and I am surrounded by a lot of family who are still Trump supporters, still big supporters of the right. I have a rule that I don't talk politics with them because I need to still love them. I need to still be,
Right.
not in a bad headspace with my family. I can't talk to them about COVID. And it's crazy to me that we have politicized public health in a way that we're jeopardizing, like I said, millions of Americans senselessly, needlessly.
Well, and now you see more and more of those stories about the people who are in the hospital, as they're being, intubated, or they're having the ventilator hooked up, or maybe they're going to the great beyond, and they say, why didn't I just get the vaccine? Why didn't I just get the vaccine? Or you're hearing from their families, if they have passed away, we're all going to but it shouldn't take that. It shouldn't literally take the death of people. I mean, there was video, I think it was from St. Louis County, Missouri last week, I think. And the St. Louis County Council, or whatever it is, County Commission, voted to, ban mask mandates. And like the crowd went crazy. Like, they were jumping up and down as if they'd won some lottery. And the only lottery they won is like getting sick and dying. Yeah. Like, before their time. It's just like, you can't imagine it, right?
It's not normal. And I mean, and you were talking about this just a minute ago. What's really infuriating about it is that, in some parts of the country, the Democratic Party is really weak. Florida is one of those places where our Democratic Party just is not strong. The framework of the party in Tallahassee is not strong. And so it gives DeSantis impunity to say whatever he wants to say, to do whatever he wants to do, and to know that when the time comes, when thousands, if not millions of Floridians have been killed or impacted by COVID, that he's going to be able to say, look, it's the failed Biden administration. If they had gotten this under control, no one would have died. And it is a straw man, and it is a red herring, and it's just a terrible thing to do because people will fall for it. I mean, he will have Fox News propagating anything that he wants to say, and it's just untrue. He alone is culpable in this in Florida. He could make the decision to lead, and he is choosing to make the decision to worship Donald Trump. And I don't understand it. The man has no power. No one listens to him anymore.
But Ryan, I'd ask this, is that, I mean, you and Rick have worked in Florida politics for a long time. And we're seeing this at the national level too, which is, it can't just be on the Democrats to say enough is enough, right? There have to be enough members of the Republican Party, elected members of the Republican Party, leaders of the Republican Party, who say, I'm not going to do this. And right now there are two of them in the whole country, right? And they both happen to sit in Washington, D.C. What do you, I mean, having spent enough time probably in Tallahassee, don't you think there are a lot of these members of the state legislature, or, maybe, appointees at the BOE, the Board of Education, who are like, this is ridiculous. What are we doing? But why don't they stand up?
They're not going to stand up because they want to be reelected, and they're terrified of their base. I mean, I have long thought, Reed, that closed primaries, I understand the point of them, but I think that they are leading us down a dangerous path, because you and I both know, having both consulted in campaigns before, that that is your base, your red meat base shows up to those. Your middle of the road voter is busy with their lives. They're living their lives. They don't show up to primaries. And so primaries typically will push you far to the left, far to the right, because you have to get there in order to get into the general. And I think that that's the problem, is that we are losing, in order for politicians to be able to keep their seats, they're having to appeal to a red meat base that is not where the majority of Floridians are. It's not where the majority of Americans are, but that's who's showing up to the ballot box. If you want to change things, you have to show up in primaries. You have to get involved early on. I mean, I have been known to switch my voter registration before a primary so that I can vote for or against somebody. It's important.
Right.
That's an important thing. I think closed primaries right now are what concerns me the most, because that is what's leading to this. They're afraid of losing their seats. So even if they don't agree with it, they're falling in line because they will lose committee assignments. Right now, all Florida Republicans are being told your governor is going to be on the ballot in 2024 running for president. You need to line up behind him or there are going to be consequences.
So let me switch gears based on that, Ryan. So your governor is going to be running for president in 2024.
Yep.
Okay. But there's a really, really good chance Donald Trump, another Florida resident, is going to be running for president in 2024. I see those two, and DeSantis is, maybe not the brightest bulb in the marquee, but he's not the dimmest either. He's got to know that these trains are headed for a collision. It looks like he's been doing his best to sidestep all of the stuff to the extent he can. But that's not how Trump operates. So how do you see that in the context of DeSantis knowing, and he's gotten a lot of good press amongst, Republican groups. He's been out to California. He was in Utah. He was in Colorado. He's certainly making the rounds. How does he avoid, the Trump train coming to eat him when they may be DeSantis voters in Florida, but they're probably Trump voters first?
Oh, yeah. They're definitely Trump voters first. I think it's interesting. One of the things very few people know that I think it's probably on us to put out there more is that DeSantis has hired some of Trump's former advisors, some of his former campaign manager, one in particular that we had unseated, is now working for Ron DeSantis. So
is that Brad Parscale?
It would be Brad Parscale. And so,
Donald, the guy who stole money from you, Donald, is now working for Ron DeSantis.
He is.
What do you think about that?
Yep. He's advising him on how to beat you. And so I think that's an interesting plot twist in this, is that there are people who have jumped off of Trump's sinking ship who are advising other Republicans right now that are going to go down the same exact path. They're maybe not as obnoxious as Donald Trump. And that's something that, we have warned people about constantly, is that, Trump is awful and he is a bad case scenario, but the worst case scenario is someone who is smarter, better looking and better auditory than Trump, going out and saying, hey, I'm going to run and I'm going to truly do some evil shit. And that's what we have to worry about with a Ron DeSantis. That's what we have to worry about with a Josh Hawley. That's what we have to worry about with a Ted Cruz. These guys are better at it than Donald Trump is. And they are hiring the people who got Trump where he was when he came down the elevator or escalator, Reed, I laughed. I could not believe this was even something that was being considered. And he's hired the people who brought him from the escalator to the White House to advise him. It's going to be a very interesting thing to watch this play out. And I think Ron DeSantis is betting on legal battles, plaguing Trump and keeping him out of the race. So he's continuing to do what he does. He was in Utah. He was in your backyard just this past weekend talking all kinds of crazy.
Oh, yeah. No, and Utah, we were talking, just to skip back to primaries for a second, the Utah legislature was considering a bill. I don't think it got through this year's session, that would say that basically there was a deadline by which you had to re-register for a party as a party member, whether or not it was Republican or Democrat, so that you couldn't switch parties, right before and participate in, obviously, in Utah in a Republican primary. So they're clearly clamping down on ways that that others who they don't approve of can participate. All right, Ryan, here we go. Kyle Ruggles asked this question on YouTube. Is there any accountability for politicians? Remember the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia? Why doesn't this happen in the USA? Well, Kyle, thanks for the question. Because we are a democracy, and theoretically, in a functioning and healthy democracy, the way that you punish politicians is by electing somebody else. As we have seen, though, and this has been true for years, right? Like, we're just now coming to ahead on this stuff, is that politicians who get elected want to get elected. They want to make it easier for themselves to get reelected and make it harder for others. that goes for political parties, both the Republican and the Democratic Party in this country. So I think that this is one of those things where elections are going to be the part that we have to work on, but it's going to take a lot of all of us, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, banding together for for as long as I can think of, at least through 2022 and 2024, to deliver some really devastating electoral losses to these people. And this is the other part too. At the state level, especially in places like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and Louisiana, they're happy to put their politicians in prison. As a country, we don't tend to do that. Ryan, I don't know what you think.
I would add to that. I think one of the biggest things plaguing our country right now is too many people are keeping up with the Kardashians and not enough are keeping up with what's going on with their own country. And it's time. I mean, Americans have to tune in. You know what? Politics can be really exciting. Politics can be really boring. Public policy can be really boring. I know, Reed, you and I are policy wonks and we love it. But, some Americans go cross-eyed. They need to start paying attention. They need to get involved. You cannot skip a primary anymore, guys. You cannot skip an election. You cannot say, well, I don't like either of them, I'm not going to vote. You have to pick the lesser of two evils. You have to pick the one that is not going to end our country. And right now, the reason you're seeing that there is no consequence and there is no accountability is people are not showing up to vote them out. They're complaining, but they will not do anything about it. You have to do something about it. It's on you. We cannot do everything. The voters have to show up. We can lead you to water, but we cannot make you drink it. Please, please, please get involved.
All right, Ryan. So over the weekend in Tennessee, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy was speaking to a bunch of Republicans, and they gave him a gavel. And I saw the picture of it. It's this gigantic gavel that makes McCarthy seem smaller than he is. But in his remarks, he said he would invite all the people there to his swearing in as Speaker of the House when Nancy Pelosi handed it over to him, handed the Speaker's gavel over to him, and it would be hard for him to, quote, not hit her with it. This is one of those things where, like, I can believe he said it because he's not that bright. But what does it say to you as someone who is watching this stuff? Like, what? I mean, do these guys just not think about this stuff at all? I mean, do they think this stuff is funny? Like, how do you see this? I mean, we're gonna, just so you know, guys, Rick and I were on the phone, and Rick's in the lab right now working on something for Kevin that will be just freaking brutal. So just be on the lookout for that probably a little later this week. But Ryan, what do you think? Like, what does this mean?
Well, it's so frustrating, Reed, because, I was a member of the Republican Party. I loved my party. I supported them full-heartedly. I did not believe, and anytime anyone said, the Republican Party is waging a war on women, I was like, this is bullcrap. I'm in this party. I would not be a part of a party that's waging a war on women. But my governor just signed onto the brief going before the Supreme Court trying to outlaw abortion and overturn Roe versus Wade. And my governor and my country is talking publicly about hitting a woman with a gavel, with a hammer in front of people and trying to get laughs. And I think this all started with, some of the comments that Donald Trump made when he was running in 2016, where he just came after women and he got away with it. And so you're seeing more and more of an attack on women where there is a true war on women. There's a war on our bodies. There's a war on our mindset. There's a war to keep us silent. And it's infuriating. It's infuriating that he's getting away with it. It's infuriating that there are women who will applaud him saying that. It's a cult. I don't know what else to say. It's a cult. It's an anti-woman cult.
Well, I mean, I thought there were a couple of things. One is, the idea of hitting a woman of any age, but let alone an 81-year-old woman in the head with what is a ceremonial hammer, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, that he thinks he's going to be Speaker, even if Republicans win next year.
No way.
Right. The jacketless wonder Jim Jordan is more likely to be Speaker of the House. Donald Trump's more likely to be Speaker of the House if Republicans win than Kevin McCarthy ever is. I mean, is he now just trying to? I mean, we have that expression, right? We're like riding the tiger. So does Kevin not understand ultimately that the tiger eats him? Is that his problem?
I don't think any of them do. And I think the ones who may understand that are not worried about it because they're fighting for helter skelter. They're not fighting for America. I mean, you look at this Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene tour that they're doing. This is an intimidation tour. This is not about coming after Democrats. This is about firing up the red base to back them, to continue to back the far right. And it should scare everybody. It should scare everybody because what they are trying to do is silence people like Liz Cheney. They're trying to silence people like Mitt Romney. The sanity that still does exist in the Republican Party, and there certainly is not much of it, but they are trying to intimidate. They are trying to scare and trying to tell them, like, look, we will find someone to run against you. We will come campaign. We will get people fired up. Reed, you and I have both been targets of these vicious mobs and some of the things that they will say and do and threaten your family with. And that's what they're trying to do to their colleagues in Congress. It's terrorism.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, the Green Gates Roadshow came to California and no one in Orange County, right, once the bastion of Reaganism wanted anything to do with them. Then they were out in front of the Justice Department last week to protest the inhuman treatment of people who were being held without bail as insurrectionists, and were absolutely overrun by a bunch of folks who wanted nothing to do with them. And they literally ran away into their cars. Gates and Green and Gosar and all those other idiots. And so, that's performance art in some way, but it's also important. Because it demonstrates that there are people out there who are willing to say, you're going to stand on a street corner. We're not going to let you get away with the bullshit that you want to spread. And I think that, this is, as we talk about too, this is all part of a broader movement. It's well funded. It's dedicated. It's patient. When we came up in it, it was one that I think still had some, I hope, notion of a conservative view of governance. But that's gone now. But it still utilizes those same tools very effectively. And I would say far more effectively typically than the Democrats do.
I will say one of the things that was encouraging to me. I mean, I can sneeze and find myself in Alabama. I am right on the line. In Alabama, there were two different rallies. I think one was a Trump rally and one was a Gates Green rally. One I think was supposed to be in Orange Beach, and the other was supposed to be at the USS Alabama. And
I've been yelled at by the mayor of Orange Beach, but that's another story.
That's a hard thing to do. They have a good time on Orange Beach.
I know. But
both were canceled. The state of Alabama said nope. And I thought that was great because, again, I live in the heart of Gates country. I mean, he is. Right. I have the distinct honor of being represented by Matt Gaetz, Ron DeSantis, Rick Scott, and Marco Rubio. Yay me.
I think that's like in that old Seinfeld episode where Kramer finds himself at the corner of First Avenue and First Street. You're at the end of the universe.
Yes, I think. I am the first one who will end up on the wall. Right. if this goes south. But it was encouraging. It was encouraging to see a governor like, hey, Ivy, say, not in my state. We're not going to do this. I would love to see people take back the right. I would love to see the right take back the right from the fascists. I would love to see us go back to being the establishment. And you know what? Yes, the establishment is so boring, Reed. But you know what? Sometimes you want your government to be boring.
It's funny you say that because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine a couple of months ago, and they said, "Wow, Joe Biden is really boring." And I'm like, "That's the whole point.
Isn't it great?"
That's the point of of living in a democracy, is that you don't wake up every morning and say, what mood is the dear leader in today? That's the whole idea. Right? The whole idea is that the government is there for the things we need. It leaves us alone generally, to do the things how we're going to live our lives. And it takes care of those who, have fallen through the cracks. That's, I think, broadly, what folks think. And now here we are. It's no, Republicans aren't going to do any of it. It's just about power. It's just about holding on to stuff. It's being able to tell people what to do. And, you know, to your point about just throwing red meat to as many tigers as they possibly can to keep them, to keep them coming back.
No, absolutely. And I mean, quietly and steadily, Biden is getting stuff done. I mean, we have an infrastructure bill that has the votes in the Senate. That is something that we desperately need in this country. So he is tiptoeing through and he's not making waves and he's getting stuff done. And that's what leaders do. Leaders don't need to draw attention to themselves all the time. They don't need to do that. They don't need validation from everyone. They can just get stuff done. And he is leading. He is doing what's right for the country. He is working across party lines. He is taking care of COVID as best he can, despite the fact the Republicans are sticking up problems for him everywhere they can. And I mean, he's leading. You can't argue it.
No. But as you said, on the infrastructure piece, that's going to get done with Republican votes. Trump is pissed about it. A lot of the members, the House Republicans, are pissed about it because they're going to give Biden a win. And, it's probably, to your point about the establishment, that very well might be with people like Portman, with people like Toomey and others joining this. That might be the last gasp of the establishment. That might be the last policy thing they do on the way out the door. Now, once they're done with that, I would hope they get back to the business of democracy. And I hope that, Leader Schumer in the Senate does bring the Senate back and does pass comprehensive voting rights, that does put the Voting Rights Act of 1965 back in place to the extent that it can. Because as we know, what they didn't get done as far as voting, making it tougher to vote this year, they'll get done in the sessions they have next year.
Absolutely.
And so, we need to solve this problem, and we need to solve it now, because as we like to say, without the rest of this stuff, without democracy and the ability, as Kyle said, to hold politicians accountable for their bad actions, inactions, whatever the case might be, the rest of this stuff doesn't matter. All right, Ryan. So we are going to let people get back to their Monday. So, guys, remember that LPTV is on hiatus for August, but never fear. Lunch with Lincoln will be here to keep you company on Mondays and Fridays. The Lincoln Project podcast is still in production, and so we will see you, I believe, Tuesdays and Thursdays as well. Until then, I want to thank B for doing all the stuff behind the scenes. And for everybody else, I hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you soon. Thanks all.